Welcome to the Reinventing the White Coat podcast, where we delve into conversations aimed at helping you foster a healthy relationship with your career and yourself. If you're a physician feeling unfulfilled or burned out or want to prevent yourself from going down that path, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jennifer Scher, pediatrician, chief wellness officer, and executive and life coach. Sit back and relax as we explore ways to live your best life and have a career in medicine. Today, I welcome Michael Swartz for a special episode. It's special today, actually, for a couple of reasons. First, because after this episode, I'm actually planning to take a little bit of a recording hiatus. So this is going to be my last episode for a little while. And mostly what's so special for me about this episode is that Michael is our very first non-physician guest. And I had to have him here for my last episode before taking a little bit of break because I could not think of a better topic to leave you with, to think about and ponder. I know this episode is going to resonate with every single one of our clinical listeners because Michael is a certified financial planner and physician development coach who specializes in working with physicians to develop comprehensive retirement plans. And no matter what stage you're at in your approaching retirement, it is never too early to get started or too late. So with that, Michael, I welcome you, and I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you for having me, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's get right to it. And first, I always ask my guests to kind of tell me how they got to where they are. So how did you get into this line of business?
Well, start with my family. My mom retired as a private wealth consultant at Wells Fargo. My dad retired from chief credit officer at a bank. So finance is in our blood. And when I got into finance, we started in the insurance industry as most financial advisors do. And so you get your life and DI and you sell life and disability insurance. And then we quickly realized that wasn't for us. And when I say we, I mean me and my business partners. We actually moved to an investment advisory firm and we became investment advisors. And then we quickly realized that we were providing comprehensive financial planning, not just insurance or investment advice. And so my business and partner and I, 4 years ago, launched our registered investment advisory firm, Lacrosse Financial Planning. And the goal was always to do financial planning for clients, but the insurance company kept asking us to sell life and disability. The investment company was charging our clients significant fees. And so we are now in the fee-only registered investment advisory or RIA space. And so the only fees that the clients are paying are to the advisor themselves or to the planner. And we really wanted to make it as transparent as possible in a world full of financial professionals who may not have the client's best interest in mind. We've always been motivated to be as transparent as possible with the fees. So it was a bit of a long trek to get here, but the fee-only RIA space is where we've landed intentionally. And so that's kind of my professional career trajectory to where I'm at today.
So why doctors?
So my wife works as a physician assistant in palliative care here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so she's at Gunderson Health System. It was actually cited by Atul Gawande in Being Mortal. And so she actually works at that palliative department.
Are you kidding me? I love that book.
Yeah. And so she actually knows some of the team members that are quoted there. And so it was absolutely phenomenal for her. And so I firsthand awareness of what PAs, clinicians, and physicians were going through. And so I tailored my financial planning practice to medical professionals and work with several of the physicians and clinicians at Gunderson Health System. Being that I was already in their benefits for our family, it was a natural niche to follow. And that kind of led me to discovering this retirement problem for physicians.
So what is our retirement problem? I mean, I know what mine is and what some of my colleagues, but you work with a whole slew of us. So tell me.
Yeah, it has a background of financial, and that's really what led me to it. Is as I'm doing research and writing this book, I started putting some numbers together, and the 401k plan is actually only 47 years old. For anybody that started working at 18 and is 65 today, they are the first individual to have access to a 401k savings plan for their entire career. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And so over the course of careers, some more wrinkles got added, tax planning strategies. In fact, the Roth IRA is just 27 years old. And so a lot of the financial planning tools that we're using to retire on really haven't been time tested over generations, for sure. And so financial professionals are probably looking at this going, well, we've got 2 or 3 decades of folks retiring with 401ks and a couple decades of folks retiring with Roth IRAs. But the tax strategy piece and how we navigate investment planning and taxable distributions in retirement, there's an optimization problem to run there.
Mm.
And specifically with physicians, we'll talk a bit later about what some of those specific planning opportunities are. But as I was looking at it through a financial lens, I decided to write a book. And so we launched the Health and Wealthness brand back in the start of 2023 to say not only is it the wealthness problem, but it's a health problem as well. And as you've probably talked about in several of your podcasts, physician mental health is a very challenging problem right now for anyone in clinical practice. And retirement adds a whole new transition and layer of complexity to that problem. And so not only is there a massive financial shift, there's a massive personal shift that happens at retirement.
Yeah.
And
I
that's what
love
we're
that
looking into.
concept, Michael. I love that you use health and wealthness. That's a great tagline or title. Very
Thank
cool.
you. I do have to cite my source there. My business partner is actually the one that came up with that. And so he said, "What do you think about health and wellness?" I said, "Absolutely. That's great."
Yeah, it totally fits in alignment with the a wellness podcast. So kudos.
Thank you.
So is this some of, you talk a lot about reclaiming agency over the retirement process. Is that what you're alluding to here?
Yeah, and the personal retirement problem is what we're calling it. It's a reclamation of agency and structure. And so for a lot of physicians, it was deciding early, whether it's high school or maybe an undergrad, to become a physician. And from that day forward, the physician's career path is generally structured ahead of them. It's undergraduate, master's, doctorate, residency, potentially a fellowship. You get a little bit of creative latitude there, and then it's launched into the career. And so, really, for the last 3 to 4 decades of a physician's career, most of that roadmap has been laid out in front of them,
Hmm.
and they bring their personal flavor to the profession. Unfortunately, retirement is a blank slate. And a lot of physicians reach retirement and end up wondering, what's next?
Hmm.
And having sacrificed so much to be successful in a career in practice, a lot of times physicians lose their sense of agency.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this off the podcast, but that whole spectrum of, a rusted internal compass where you just forsake some of your own ideals and values and adopt those of the healthcare system that you work for, all the way up to this concept of corporate Stockholm syndrome, where it's as if the trauma response to working in healthcare creates a need for the environment to feel familiar.
Yeah.
And when that goes away at retirement, physicians are faced with a bit of an identity crisis. And so the whole concept of health and wellness is reclaiming that agency while you're still in the working environment, while you are retiring and in those final years of your career, rather than waiting until retirement and adding it as another thing to do in a very tumultuous setting, in
Yeah.
that transition.
So that's actually one of the things that I love about the practice and your angle here, that financial planners really, I mean, focus on the practical issues. And I actually do want to ask you a couple of the practical questions. But that mindset piece and the concept of retirement, and that is such a layer of complexity that's so challenging. But before we dig into that, let me ask you about sort of in the early stages, because what I find our earliest challenges are, with high earners like physicians, they start off as such low earners, and it takes so long for them to become high earners. And so I feel like so many of us lose the early opportunities. Um, so for me, I grew up, my dad was very much finance focused. And even when I was making like 2 cents an hour as a resident, the hospital offered it wasn't a 401k, whatever it is in a 403b, whatever it
Sure. Yep.
is. He said, I don't care, whatever it is, put something into that. And I did what my father said. And, whether you're making
Yeah.
2 cents an hour or 1 cent an hour, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But it sort of set me up, I think, to be in a better place than most of my you know, people at my same level. Most of us don't think about this until we are so far into it. We've lost so much. So how, I know you work with people on the tail end for the most part, but what advice do you have to people on the early mid part of their careers?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's a phenomenal question because even just being intentional about who you're working with is a huge part of that. There will be disability and life insurance salesmen who want to work with physicians because they need big DI and life insurance policies, and there's a big commission to be had there. And so I would say first be cautious about who you're working with, and really look for someone in the fee only space. And there's an actual an online group called the Fee Only Network where physicians can find fee only financial planners in their area. I
Hmm.
would say start there. Find someone who's going to be providing you comprehensive fiduciary advice, and that fee only relationship is probably the lowest conflict of interest that a financial planner can have with you. And if you find somebody with the CFP marks, which are actually a prerequisite to be a part of one of the fee only organizations, that is really the gold standard for starting out. And what those folks are going to tell you is saving early compounds over time. And so every dollar you save in your mid 20s, based on historical performance, is worth about $14 in retirement. So every $1 you put away early is worth 14 times that in retirement. So start early. And then the other piece I would say is don't forsake your mental well-being to max out that Roth IRA each year. Many residents I work with are also going through family planning, saving for down payments on home. And so with the limited resources that you do have, be intentional with them.
Tell me more about that. Don't
Sure.
max, like, what do you mean? You
So
mean don't
I've
kill yourself in trying to save, don't not live? Is that what you're
correct.
saying?
Correct. And so we run projections and we say, hey, in your 2 years, your two remaining years of residency here, there's, a $7,000 maximum contribution that you could make to your Roth IRA for these 2 years. So between you and your spouse, that's $14,000 each year, so $28,000. Is that the highest and best use of your dollar?
Mm,
Because in the years of early attending, you're going to be able to max out your 401k
yeah.
with Roth contributions at $23,500 a year. So you can make that up in a matter of 1 year with employer match contributions to your 401k. So could you use that $28,000 for something else, whether that's a down payment on a home or some folks are going through IVF? I know the medical community kind of has this very strong challenge of family planning. It's very common, and I think something people need to talk about more, that if investing and starting your family is more valuable than maxing out a Roth IRA, talk to a financial planner who understands those intangible benefits, who's not going to make you feel bad for not maxing out that Roth IRA.
Yeah. I love that permission to not, that's one of my mindset trouble, like sticking points, actually, if you want to know, I grew up with like my parents were depression era parents and everything was save, 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 save. And I sometimes do, I mean, don't get me wrong, I buy what I need, but it's very hard for me to let go of that piece over the course of my life. And now as I approach sort of later stages, do you find that a lot of doctors um, have a hard time letting go of the fact that they're going to have income when they?
Yes, I would say I'm biased here because I'm a financial planner, but
Hmm.
that is the number one issue outside of the technical that we're addressing with retiring physicians is folks in their 60, at age 65 had grandparents who were likely raised during the Great Depression, right?
Hmm.
Go back 65 years and another 50 for two generations of 25 years apiece. And grandparents were being raised in the 1930s, which is when the Great Depression and Dust Bowl drought was sweeping across the United States.
Hmm.
And that was taught to your parents, which was passed on to you
Right.
generationally. That's a very real mindset to have, is it's that we call it the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset.
Hmm.
And yeah, continuing to work for the paycheck and saving more serves folks well in the accumulation phase. To your point, we're saving early. We've set ourselves up for retirement, but there's a polar shift, a 180-degree flip in mindset from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase. And while that scarcity mindset really serves the savers well, it creates a lot of challenges for retirees.
Yeah. At what point, though, if you think about your career or your life kind of on a curve, right? Accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. At what point should we wait until we're fully retired before the distributing, or is there a place to sort of have like a slow down income, like a, like is there a best practice for how we make this transition?
I'd say there's no one size fits all solution, but when we start looking at what tools we have near the end of that arc of career, taking either a paid or unpaid sabbatical serves two purposes. It can be, a really good test drive of retirement. And if it's truly an unpaid sabbatical, which, depending on which health system you work for, it can give you an opportunity to create income from some source other than your paycheck. And you get a little bit of a sense of what that's like. And so there's different tools that you can do, right? Dropping down in your FTEs, potentially delegating some of your workload and stepping out slowly as opposed to just making it this 100 to 0 transition. But yes, if there's a way that you can maybe slow down on the income piece through the different tools that you have offered by your healthcare system, it's absolutely a way to test drive that. That doesn't mean flipping that switch overnight.
Hmm. Yeah. I kind of like that for perspective of, um, because we don't know how long we're going to live, right? There's always my
Right.
sister, I think I told you when we've spoken before, my sister's also a financial planner, and and my mother, who's still with us in her 90s, is, how long, how much money, how long? She always says, well, if you tell me how long you're going to live, I can tell you how
Yeah.
long your money's going to last.
Yeah. And I would say, to that point, most folks take that conservative mindset into the early stages and early period of their retirement. And what we talk about is if you've heard of the book Die with Zero.
I did read that.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you done a podcast topic on that specifically? Have you shared that concept at all with the
No, let's
listeners?
talk about it a little bit
Okay.
because
And it's an interesting concept, but the bottom line is what can you do during the early years of retirement or even while you're working to take some of your income or some of your assets and convert them into memory dividends? And so you're not spending money
memory
to spend
dividends, I
it.
love that term. Go
Yeah,
on.
and so what can you do in your lifetime to enjoy the assets that you've accumulated and share them with your family and friends and purchasing experiences rather than just passing away with a large estate. And the concept gets the ball rolling to take some small steps to doing that. We haven't had any clients retire and take a $250,000 distribution to buy the yacht, right?
Right.
But we laugh, but most physicians get to the point where, somewhere between $2 to $5 million in their retirement account. And in theory, they could make that transaction, pay the maintenance costs, and it would not affect their income planning at all. And so right now I'm working with a client who said, you know what, we're going to build the home. We're going to build a retirement home. It's a 57-year-old physician, and it's a $1.2 million home, custom built, that they're taking money out of their brokerage account to pay for. And so doing that will give them the opportunity to have a beautiful, large ranch home that they can host Christmases, Thanksgivings,
Hmm.
birthdays, summer parties at. And so it's going to be a gathering place for their entire family. And the one part that makes it a little easier to stomach is once they build it, they'll sell their current home for over half that price and
Yeah.
recoup most of that. And so it also transfers the money from one form of asset to another. So it's not really an expense, but it's building a dream space to create those memories with their family. And I would say if you haven't done some of that goal setting in your retirement planning, so often financial planners are talking about the guardrails and the income and Social Security and creating a cash flow in retirement. And I think it needs to go one step further and say, but what is that cash flow affording us in terms of
Yes.
experiences and creating a life and environment that we really enjoy being in retirement?
Yeah. It's kind of that delayed gratification. We think about retirement in terms of we need X amount of money so that we can stop working. But if you wait until you're 70 when you stop working, then how are you going hiking? How are you going, when are you going to do these things? The concept behind Die with Zero to me was fascinating. Up until I read that book, I can't remember who recommended it to me, but up until I read it, I sort of was of that, save, save, save mindset, and I want to leave money for my children. And they talk about like, wouldn't you rather spend the money on your children while they're alive and get to see them, you know, enjoy it and spend it, um, and I still can't wrap my mind around the concept in the book though, with because you still don't know when that end day is going to be, and I don't think it nailed that point down.
No, and one thing he does say, which I will object to, just as honestly, is purchasing annuities so that your cash flow never runs out. And I would say, well, there's good annuities out there. Um, Most of them pale in comparison to retaining ownership of those assets. So we do not recommend annuities in this office. But to your point, you won't run out of money if you purchase a product that always gives you an income while you're alive. And so that's really his recommendation to offset that concern is, hey, if we've got Social Security and annuity that's always providing us an income, we will never run out of money. We'll always have
Mhm.
that cash flow, and then we're free to spend the rest. And so, in theory, it makes sense. But like I said, annuities are extremely expensive, and some can eat themselves up. And we've run projections on them. That wouldn't be my recommendation for a
Mhm.
solution, but that would be his solution to that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the money mindset problems that clinicians tend to have is that we are so um, trained to not pay attention to money, that money is dirty and it's bad and it's evil, and focus on patient care, patient care, patient care. And that's fine. I mean, that's been drilled into my own head as well as everybody else. But we have to run our businesses and we do have to run our families. So how do you get through that? If we don't pay attention to it, it's not going to take care of ourselves. And not all of us are married to financial
Or have a
people
sister.
or
Yeah, or have a sister we
sisters,
can
right?
bounce it by. Yeah.
Right. So how do you even engage? How do you get, there's probably people who have never really thought about financial planning here. How do you get them to even take the first step?
I, you bring up a really good point, Jen, because that is really the greatest challenge is when a physician walks into the room, they are the authority. Whether it's patient care, even at family gatherings, you're the doctor, right? And
Mhm.
the family members come up and ask really intruding questions about whatever health issue they've got. But there's a prestige in that. And even when a doctor, steps into a room, they have such a wealth of knowledge that when a patient asks a question, you're running through an entire archive of information that you have access to, at your fingertips in your mind. And there's this massive disparity between the patient having to basically trust the doctor because they're the expert on a matter. And I think physicians are very used to feeling that way. And so when we go role reversal, and I sit down with a physician who's used to DIYing it, especially in the accumulation phase, if we don't have a professional that we're talking to before we start this retirement planning process, we've probably been doing it ourselves. And as a physician, used to being the expert in the room, it's the first time you sit down with someone who's a certified financial planner, might be fee only, but has this tenure of knowledge at
Mhm.
their fingertips. And now the physician becomes the patient. And that can be a really, really uncomfortable setting for the first
Yeah.
time. And I would say find someone who's willing to go through multiple interviews, demonstrate value ahead of time, that you have permission to at least sleep on the decision
Hmm.
multiple times. I mean, some client relationship development periods are as long as 6 months to a year, where I'm speaking with physicians for the first time and I have to continually kind of demonstrate that expertise and value to say, there is a benefit to you working with someone professionally, and there's a cost associated with it, but the financial professional should be able to demonstrate a value that far exceeds any expense that you're paying to them. So it's going to be an extremely uncomfortable conversation the first
Hmm.
time you have it. But don't let that stop you from, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars on taxes or getting someone who helps you shift your mindset to enjoy retirement more.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process though, Jen. I feel a little bit of heartache on that one because I think a lot of people don't work with qualified professionals for that reason. It's a large hurdle to get over.
Hmm. Yeah. I know. I can think of at least one of my colleagues who has been doing this so beautifully. I mean, this guy has been living his best life, leading into retirement in such a beautiful way, but most of us are not. And I think some of my colleagues I look at, they continue working, um, not just because they don't know how much money they have or for the financial planning, but because of the mindset piece that they don't know what else could they possibly do with their lives. Um, It's so interesting when you think that I think you brought this up at the beginning, how doctors' identities are so tightly tied to their to what they do as being who they are. Um, how do you have conversations with your clients about things like that and help that? I mean, that's what I do that a lot with people, but I wonder in your role as a coach and financial planner, is that a place that you go?
Absolutely. And that's really the concept behind the Health and Wealthness book that's coming out in January. It's helping physicians re-identify their values, identity, and purpose outside of their role as a physician.
Mm.
Because when you say, I am a doctor, it's who you are and it's what you do. And so typically the values of the healthcare system are adopted. And so there's your identity. I'm a doctor. There's your purpose. It's what I do. And the values are those of the healthcare system, providing excellent patient care through love and connection with each patient that comes in, right? And so we talk about physicians really developing their own VIP retirement, the values, identity, and purpose. And once you have those values, identities, and purpose identified outside of your role as a physician, you can start working out those muscles that may not have been worked out for 3 or more decades.
Yeah, I love that because um, most of us, by the time we decide to retire or consider retiring, we'll have enough money to do whatever we want. Um, but the whatever we want is oftentimes such a big black hole.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And when we start talking about this identity piece or the purpose piece, I mean, we spend weeks talking about generating them. And we actually need to go back through some of the highest experiences and kind of mine them out of our past. And I think this is something you're familiar with as a coach too, how valuable just a clear delineation of your top 5 values are in life because they can inform so much of your behavior that then you get to live on purpose with a new identity that is also value aligned. And that's really the only
Yeah.
way to develop a life outside of physicianhood that's truly fulfilling.
Hmm. Yeah. Who did I hear say once, you spend your whole life getting to working so hard, you do what you have to do to get to the point where you can do what you want to do, right? And sometimes it takes so long that you forget what you want to do.
And that's why the practices and the health and wellness
Yeah,
concept is tailored to physicians, as physicians are the tip of the iceberg there. You know, they're at the top of the heap of folks who sacrifice so much for their career.
yeah. So do you have any little snippets of advice, maybe for each one of the age brackets, the early, mid, and late career physician that you might want to sort of take us towards the end of our conversation with?
Absolutely. So for the early stage physicians and residents, have a plan once you transition to that quote big boy or big girl paycheck. Student loans are a big conversation. Run the PSLF analysis and have grace with yourself because there's a limited resource to building your life early in your career. Don't forsake your well-being to max out a Roth IRA. For those mid-career physicians, I would say do a really strong analysis on Roth versus traditional 401k contributions. There is a right answer. If any financial planner tells you do half and half, they haven't done the homework and there is a right answer. And so as you're contributing to that 401k and kind of getting out of that bottleneck of life, when you have that discretionary income and some more time freedom back, that's when you can really start building those muscles of the die with zero concepts. Take some of your discretionary income and plan family trips. Take the time off. Don't wait till retirement, as I'm sure you can attest
Hmm.
to. It's easy to do to wait to retirement. It's not easy to start taking that time off. So use your money as a resource to start buying happiness in your life sooner than most people tell you to. And so I would say early career, have grace, mid career, practice spending that money. And then in late career, one of the biggest value adds that we see for clients right now is physicians, again, with, 2 to 3 to $4 million in their 401k, add in a spousal 401k. Let's say you're 55 today. Your RMDs don't start until your mid 70s. Those are required minimum distributions. And what most folks see is, well, I've got $4 million in my 401k. That first RMD factor is about 4%.
Hmm.
I'll have to take out $160,000. I'll be fine. There's two things to think about. The first one is your money's probably going to double once, if not twice before then. So you're not talking about four, you're talking about closer to 10 to $16 million. That's a $400,000 RMD. So project your RMDs and do some tax planning now. And the second piece is those RMD factors grow exponentially as you age. So not just your first, but look out further and run tax planning projections on your pre-tax money. Because again, that Roth IRA came into your career 27 years ago, mid-career. And so a lot of folks are retiring with a ton of pre-tax money that without proper tax planning, they're going to forego hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal and state taxes because they're not planning for these big RMDs. We call it the RMD bomb.
Hmm.
That's the biggest value add that we have as financial planners is tax planning and tax projections. And just a real quick piece in our office, we are all licensed tax preparers. We have 2 enrolled agents in the office, and so we can actually offer tax advice. And that's a big piece of it too, is if you find a certified financial planner who's, I don't want to say just a CFP, because that's a huge mark, but if it's only a CFP, they can't actually offer that tax advice. A CPA would have to do that.
Right.
So if you can work with someone who has tax abilities, that's a huge plus as well. But run those RMD projections.
That's so great. I love those different buckets, how you just broke it up like that. Now, before I ask you about your book and how people can reach you, I'm not going to hold you to this, but I wonder if you had your crystal ball, if you had any predictions with the change of administration as to what's going to happen with Social Security or any other financial, the markets, any other.
Yeah, I would say in general, the change in presidency doesn't have a tremendous impact on market performance. We are post-COVID correction. A lot of folks are talking about this background rumor of a correction coming again, and it's really a lot more dependent on the monetary and fiscal policy. And as we've seen even in 2024, the Fed was talking about cutting rates and they haven't. And so it unfortunately it will depend a lot on the first 6 months to a year of the presidency. But with the Republicans, I believe the outcome was all three across the board were Republican now nominated, or excuse me, the majority is with the Republicans. And so what we probably will see is an extension of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And I would say if you haven't looked into how that affects your income and tax planning, looking at the material facts of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and planning on what's in place is just as equally valuable. But when it comes to forecasting, market performance, I would say, as you zoom out on the market, the longer your time horizon, the more frequently you see that positive rate of return. And as you're doing retirement planning, having 3 to 5 years of income set aside in a conservative investment is the most valuable thing that you can do. We call that the war chest. And then if all your other funds are set up to be outside of the dependency of the market, right? You're not dependent on them for income. You can leave that money invested in the market, and even if there is a correction, most last between 12 and 24 months, some of the longest taking 48 to 52 months. But if you're not dependent on that money over the next 3 to 5 years, staying in the market and getting those higher rates of return is far more valuable than moving to a more conservative portfolio. A lot of people say, well, take your age minus a number, and that's how you should have a 40-60 portfolio when you reach retirement. And if you're not looking at specific sleeves of funds and just treating it as one big whole, you're still going to be subject to that market correction. And so what we really say is, nope, take the income that you need, put that in a conservative bucket, and it's always there for you. Then on years the market's good, you can fill that bucket up bigger and bigger. And when the market's down, we just live off those conservatively invested resources. So I love the question. I know I gave a political answer, but my answer would be have a plan for that. And then if the market goes up, you're in a better position. And if the market goes down, you're not worried about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will say that listening to you, I think my take home is that it's really important to think about this stuff, and it's equally important to live your life while you're thinking about this stuff.
It is absolutely a both and you're right. That's what health and wellness is all about, is money as a tool and a resource. There's rules in place and how we manage it, but how are we using that to inform quality of life? That is spot on.
Okay, so your book, I guess you just said, is coming. Probably your book will be out before this podcast airs. So how can people find it, or how can they find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so the website that I'm on is healthwealthness.com. And so HealthWealthness.com. And so if folks want to go on there, we have an order a book button right on the page. I'd be happy to ship it out. The biggest piece here too is, Jen, and we'll be collaborating on this too, is we actually have large list of retirement coaches on the website as well. And Jen is a part of it. She's been phenomenal. It's been fun working with her. And so if you're looking for just a coach, there's coaching resources. If you're looking for just a financial planner, find a CFP who's fee only. In parentheses, if they give tax advice, even better. And if you're looking for someone who does both, that's really what health and wellness is all about. So I appreciate you asking about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Michael.
Thank you too, Jen.
Okay, and as we say goodbye, I want to just turn for one moment my attention directly to our listeners and thank you for choosing to spend your precious time here with us. I hope this conversation was helpful, and I hope to see you back when I return from my short break. That's all for this episode of Reinventing the White Coat. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. If you're interested in coaching or in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to me online at sharecoaching.com. Thanks for listening, and don't be afraid to live your best life.